The dim glow of the lamp fell across sheets of paper filled with hurried lines of ink. A man with tired features and deeply set eyes trembled as he wrote yet another confession. Each letter felt like a seal on his own disgrace. These words were not meant for anyone but one woman, Carrie. Yet he knew that if even a single letter fell into the wrong hands, it would shatter not only his marriage, but his entire political career. This man was Warren Harding, the future 29th President of the United States. The early years of the 20th century painted him as a respectable senator. But behind that polished image raged a storm of passion and secrecy. "My dearest Carrie," he wrote, "without your gaze, the world is empty. I fear only one thing, losing you." The passion etched into those letters was far too intimate for a man who dreamed of the White House. But his love for his best friend's wife eclipsed everything. Honor, duty, reputation. Carrie Fulton Phillips was a married woman, yet that never stopped the affair that stretched across years. They met in secret, in hotel rooms, in secluded houses where Harding arrived under cover of night. Each time he swore to her that this was forever, that he could not live without her. But as he climbed higher up the political ladder, their meetings grew increasingly dangerous. Carrie understood her power. She knew this was no ordinary man, but someone whose signature could shape the destiny of a nation. That knowledge gave her a strange, intoxicating sense of superiority. By the early 1910s, their passion had turned into dependence. Harding seemed unable to exist without her letters, without her presence. But shadows of fear began to creep in. What if the affair were exposed? What would his wife Florence say? What would happen if his rivals in the Senate got hold of those letters? He tried persuading Carrie not to demand so much intimacy in their correspondence, but she insisted. She wanted more than to be his lover. She wanted to be the center of his universe. And then Harding realized he was trapped. Hundreds of pages, soaked with his passion, now lay in the hands of a woman who loved him, but was also capable of threatening him. He was on the brink of becoming a presidential candidate, and Carrie made it clear. If he betrayed her, if he dared to cut her off, America would learn the truth. "You think you can walk away from me?" she whispered during one of their last encounters. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed with fire. "I won't let you pretend I never existed." Harding remained silent. Deep down, he knew. The stakes were no longer just love and honor. His fate as a president now hung in the balance. By the mid-1910s, America lived in unease. The Great War raged in Europe, and whispers grew louder in Washington that the United States could not remain on the sidelines forever. For Senator Harding, it was a time to fortify his reputation and build alliances. Yet behind closed doors, his private life was turning into a nightmare. Carrie Fulton Phillips was not merely a mistress. She was intelligent, headstrong, and socially skilled. In public, she wore the mask of a gracious woman. No one would have suspected the secret she carried. But in private, she transformed into someone who held the future president's very soul in her grasp. She often reminded him of the letters. "Your words are my power," she would say, carefully stroking the ribbon-bound stacks of pages. For her, they were proof of his devotion. For him, they were shackles he could never break free from. It was then that the word blackmail first entered their relationship. Not in blunt threats, but in subtle undertones. Carrie did not need to shout her intentions. Her hints were sharp enough. She knew those letters could destroy him in an instant. The danger grew when her sympathies for Germany became obvious. As war fever spread across America, her pro-German leanings became a liability. Harding realized that if his connection to her were exposed, it would not only be a scandal, it would invite accusations of disloyalty to his own country. He tried to distance himself, citing obligations, travel, and endless meetings. But Carrie would not let go. A single letter, a single glance from her was enough to pull him back, like a moth to a flame that burned but could not be resisted. By 1914, the tension had reached its breaking point. Carrie demanded proof of his love, demanded gifts, demanded attention. Harding felt himself sliding into an abyss. He dreamed of the White House, but knew that Carrie was his Achilles heel. In one letter, he confessed, "If the world were to learn about us, Carrie, I would be ruined. Yet my heart knows no fear, so long as I have you." She read those words over and over again, relishing the authority she held over him. Harding began to understand that he was no longer just a lover. He was a hostage. His future, his name, his ambitions, all of it lay in the hands of a woman who had grown accustomed to being both his passion and his curse. And for the first time, he wondered, what if Carrie never let him go? The year was 1917. America entered the Great War. Patriotism surged, and loyalty became the highest currency. For Warren Harding, this was an opportunity to step forward as a statesman, a man of trust. Yet his private entanglement with Carrie Fulton Phillips now loomed as the gravest danger of his career. Carrie did not hide her feelings. She openly sympathized with Germany, claiming that America had no business interfering in Europe's war. For Harding, such words were not just inconvenient, they were perilous. Any association with her, if revealed, could destroy his credibility and brand him a traitor in the eyes of the nation. Carrie understood this, and her love grew sharper, like a blade. No longer were her letters filled only with affection. They carried an edge, almost like commands. "You will never forget me, Warren," she told him. "Even if you become president, I will always be part of your life." Harding lived a double existence. By day, he was the smiling senator, delivering speeches, shaking hands, assuring people of his loyalty to the American cause. By night, he tossed in his bed, gripped by fear. Every time he wrote back to her, the walls seemed to close in tighter. In his letters, the tone of dread was unmistakable. "Carrie, I beg you to guard our secret. If it ever came out, I would be destroyed. Yet know this, everything I am belongs to you." For Carrie, these words were fuel. They reassured her that she had not lost him. They also gave her something far more intoxicating: control over a man the entire nation admired. Florence Harding, his wife, was no fool. She sensed her husband's betrayals. She was a tough and ambitious woman, determined to see him rise. But even she could not cut away the shadow that Carrie cast. Florence bore the cold wound of betrayal. Yet for political survival, she chose silence. Meanwhile, Carrie leaned deeper into her role as both lover and blackmailer. She possessed hundreds of letters, proof of every secret, every weakness. With those in her grasp, she could have ended Harding's career with a single move. By 1920, Harding was rising swiftly through the ranks, his eyes fixed on the White House. But Carrie would not vanish into the background. "You think I'll stay quiet when you sit in the Oval Office?" she warned. "No, Warren. The world will know you are mine." Those words echoed like a sentence. Harding realized that unless he found a way to silence her, his dream of becoming president could collapse before it even began. But silencing Carrie was impossible. She lived for passion, for power, for the certainty that she was unforgettable. And now, every encounter between them felt like a match hovering over a barrel of gunpowder. One spark away from a firestorm that could engulf the entire nation. The year 1920 marked a turning point. The Republican Party nominated Warren Harding as their presidential candidate. To the public, he appeared the very image of respectability. Calm, steady, a family man who promised to heal the nation after the turmoil of war. But behind this polished facade lingered a dangerous truth. Carrie still held him in her grip. By then, her frustration had grown fierce. Deep down, Carrie knew that once Harding entered the White House, he could never belong to her in the same way. His life would be watched, his movements scrutinized, every step under the gaze of reporters. And that terrified her more than anything. The thought of becoming nothing more than a hidden footnote in his story. "You think I'll let you forget me?" she whispered, clutching his hand. "I'll destroy you if you try to live without me." Her words were no idle threat. In her possession were dozens of letters where Harding bared his soul and his body in ways no man of his station should have dared to put in writing. Those letters were a loaded gun, and she held her finger on the trigger. Republican strategists were not blind to the problem. A handful of Harding's closest advisors, once they learned about Carrie, decided to act. Quietly, discreetly, they arranged what amounted to a payoff. It was said that Carrie and her husband were offered generous financial support and all expenses paid trips to Europe in exchange for her silence. Meanwhile, Harding wore the mask of composure. On campaign stages, he spoke of stability, of returning to normalcy. Crowds cheered his name. Newspapers hailed him as the nation's hope. Yet in private moments, alone in his hotel room, he would clutch his head and whisper, "If only she stays silent." Florence Harding, his wife, played her part as well. She suspected the scale of his betrayals, but her ambition outweighed her outrage. She wanted him in the White House as much as he did. Her mission was to protect his image at all costs, but Carrie had not vanished. In letters and private conversations, she reminded him of her presence. Sometimes her tone was fiery with passion, other times cold and threatening. She seemed to be testing him, measuring how far he would go to preserve his dream of power. Finally, Election Day arrived. America chose Warren Harding as its president. His hand rested on the Bible, his oath resounded through the crowd, and a new era began. Bands played, the public celebrated, but deep within himself, Harding knew the truth. All of this glory balanced on a secret that belonged to Carrie Fulton Phillips. And in her home, reading the papers, Carrie smiled. Her lover was now the most powerful man in America, and she knew something else as well. He would never be free of her. The White House welcomed Warren Harding with pomp and ceremony. To the nation, he was the embodiment of a return to normalcy after the Great War. His smile graced the newspapers. His speeches carried hope across the country. Yet behind the grandeur of the presidency, the shadow of Carrie Fulton Phillips never faded. They no longer met as freely as before. Presidential duties left little room for secret rendezvous. But the letters continued. Carrie's words still carried the same intensity. At times desperate, at times laced with threat. She demanded attention, demanded reassurance, as though determined to prove that she still had power over the most powerful man in America. Harding's replies grew shorter, more reserved. His passion had cooled, replaced by fatigue and fear. Yet he could not sever the bond entirely. Guilt, habit, and dread kept him tethered. "You've changed, Warren," she wrote. "You've grown colder, but I know you cannot live without me." He knew those letters could end him. Washington already buzzed with rumors of his wandering affections. Newspapers whispered about late-night meetings, about the president's supposed romances with secretaries. But if the cache of letters to Carrie ever reached the press, it would not just be a scandal. It would be ruin. Harding's advisors worked tirelessly to keep her at bay. She was offered trips abroad, financial assistance, anything to secure her silence. But Carrie was not a woman to fade quietly into the background. She had grown accustomed to being central in his life, to wielding the kind of influence that could shake a man to his core. Meanwhile, Harding's marriage strained under the weight of secrets. Florence Harding saw the shadows in his eyes, the hidden letters, the distance in their home. She may not have known every detail, but she understood enough. Yet her ambitions matched his. Her focus was not on personal happiness, but on ensuring his presidency endured. By 1923, the toll became visible. Harding's health faltered. Years of pressure, of constant fear, of balancing lies and duties had worn him down. His heart weakened, his energy waned. That summer, he embarked on a cross-country tour, hoping to bolster faith in his administration. Florence was by his side, ever vigilant, guarding his image. But Carrie remained in the background, still writing, still clinging to the man who once poured his soul onto paper for her. She did not know that their story was nearing its end. The summer of 1923 would be Warren Harding's last. His cross-country tour, meant to showcase confidence and unity, instead revealed a man drained of strength. In public, he forced smiles, delivering speeches that promised stability. But those closest to him saw the truth. The president was exhausted, his body betraying him. Carrie Fulton Phillips, far from the White House, lived in her own world of memories and demands. She still wrote letters, her words a mixture of devotion and reproach. "You promised never to leave me, and yet I feel you slipping away. If you go for good, I will never forgive you." Harding answered sparingly, his tone cautious and restrained. His replies no longer carried the fire of old passion. They were short, almost perfunctory, as if he wished to close the chapter, but lacked the courage to end it outright. Still, the fear remained. The possibility of exposure haunted him even as his health deteriorated. In July 1923, while in San Francisco, Harding fell suddenly ill. Doctors spoke of exhaustion, of heart failure, of stress that had worn him thin. On August 2nd, at the age of 57, Warren Harding, the 29th President of the United States, was dead. The nation mourned. Crowds filled the streets, lining up to say farewell. Newspapers printed solemn tributes. Florence Harding, ever composed, stood by his casket without shedding a tear. She knew more than she would ever reveal, and silence was her final act of loyalty or calculation. Somewhere far away, Carrie read of his death in the papers. For her, it was not just the end of a president. It was the collapse of her own secret world. The man who had poured out his soul to her, who had once seemed unable to live without her, was gone, but the letters remained. Hundreds of pages of love, desire, fear, and vulnerability. They were locked away, hidden from the public eye, as though the government itself wished to erase the scandal from memory. For decades, those letters would remain sealed, the story buried under official secrecy. Carrie's life faded into obscurity, She outlived her lover by nearly 4 decades, her name rarely spoken, her role carefully veiled. Yet those pages, waiting in silence, still carried the weight of a passion that had threatened to shake a presidency. After Harding's death, time closed the lid on their affair. Florence ordered many of his papers destroyed, while the government locked away the letters Carrie had kept. For decades, the truth was hidden, as if history itself wanted to erase the scandal. But when the letters were finally revealed, America saw more than a secret romance. They showed the character of a man. And here, I want to pause, not just to retell facts, but to ask, what kind of man was Warren Harding? If a person can betray his wife, and if he can betray his friend by taking that friend's wife, then on what grounds can we trust that he would not betray his country? History gave us the answer. Harding's presidency became synonymous with corruption. The Teapot Dome scandal, one of the greatest in American history, exposed how his administration allowed friends and allies to enrich themselves at the nation's expense. He was not just careless in private life. The same flaws, selfishness, weakness, fear of confrontation, shaped his years in office. So how do I see him? Not a hero? Not a true leader? Not a man of principle? Yes, he was charming. He could smile, win applause, and speak smoothly. But at his core, he was a weak man, too dependent on others' approval, ready to sacrifice loyalty for comfort. Such men do not rule events. They are ruled by those around them, by their lovers, their so-called friends, their greedy allies. Not a villain for evil's sake, but a coward for his own sake. And perhaps that is the most dangerous kind of leader of all. But that is only my view. What do you think? Was Warren Harding simply a flawed man caught in passion? Or was he a betrayer who let down everyone who trusted him? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion matters.